Hey guys, glad you're here. As it turns out, city life is not for me. I don't know if it's the noises, crowds, or residents being really surprisingly okay with slavery, but something about it just rubbed me the wrong way. That was my experience of Vault City, founded by the former inhabitants of Vault 8, when I arrived there in the year 2241. That's where the time machine dropped me off after I found it again. It seemed to say that after I flipped the random switch that said Restoration Project. I don't know what it did, but it suddenly felt like I was in a world where a lot of things that God had deleted had been restored by a bunch of nerdy angels. Which meant it wasn't canon to life, but was meant to be at one point. Whenever I felt like that was a thing, I put a little star mark in the corner of my journal, so look for that as I detail my journey into the vault. Despite all of Vault-Tech's faults, which are very, very many, they were good scientists who made sure to follow the scientific method. To make sure their vaults didn't fail just for being death traps, they sprinkled in control vaults. Vault 8 was one of the lucky vaults that got to close and then open with no sick experiments performed, and for most of them, it worked out really well. I was actually delighted when I arrived there in my search for a Gek. That's a whole other story that I'll eventually tell, but I will be bringing up now and then, so I want to alert you of my goal ahead of time. This is the line that may get cut if I end up not needing to discuss the Gek. I guess I'll find out. You might not if this line gets cut. When I stumbled across Vault City in my travels, I was surprised. Everyone always talked about it like it was a beacon of civilization, one of the nicest places to live right up there with New Vegas. But the only thing I saw of note was that it had walls. Lots of places had walls, though. Then I realized I was in the courtyard of Vault City. Downtown Vault City was much nicer, but most people didn't get to go there. The courtyard was where the help got to live. The quality of life might be better, but the wasteland is preferable to living here, and I mean that for both sides. Downtown Vault City is the cleanest outdoor place I have ever seen in my travels, but you have to live with snooty people, and it's really not worth it. I'll get to them later though. The first person I met was a woman named Amanda, who told me her husband, Joshua, was being held as a servant for years as a way to pay off striking a citizen. The first thing I thought was, yeah, he shouldn't have hit somebody, but the second thing was, one punch equaled years of indentured servitude? Amanda and her son would be unable to pay the protection money of Vault City and would be separated. The unending generosity of Vault City would allow them to stay, but only if they worked as servants too. Yes, they are okay with child labor as well. I wouldn't stand for this injustice and went looking to rectify it. I met Amanda's son Curtis as I was leaving her tent. He wanted my help finding his doll, Mr. Nixon, but I was too busy rescuing his dad. Unfortunately, I had a long road ahead of me before I could, so I spent some time talking to the other courtyard residents to see what I could learn. First up was John Cassidy, who owned his own bar. His voice made me swoon. Take a listen.
Well now, ain't seen you around before, stranger. Name's Cassidy.
He apparently used to be a mute, but one of those angels offered his voice up to borrow. He didn't have much to say except he did not like Vault City guards. I walked into the clinic next. The doctor told me their auto dock was a little janky, so I decided to take a look. My resume of fixing things now includes food processor, elevator, water pump, and auto dock. Dr. Andrew thanked me and I asked if maybe I could get a discount, and he exploded on me. If he politely said no, I would have left it at that. But he was so angry at my suggestion that I stole a little reward. Then I met Mr. Smith, who was struggling to make ends meet without a plow. I bartered with the local shop owner, Happy Harry, who sold me the plow. I had no need for the plow, so I gave it to Mr. Smith, and he gave me a gun. I think he was only a few days away from getting the plow himself through less legal means, and now wanted to remove the temptation. I took it with shaking hands, noticing some bloodstains, and buried it when I left the city, hoping whoever met the end of that gun could find peace. I finally made my way to the entrance of downtown, which was guarded by a second gate. They really hate non-citizens. Some guy told me there was a test that I had less than 0% chance of passing, which I know means he would have failed the test, and offered to sell me a fake passport. I decided to warn him I would turn him in unless he greased my palm a bit. I figured a $300 fine was worth letting him off the hook. I didn't even need the cash, I just liked watching him squirm. I talked to the guy who could actually give me a pass in the city. He would only issue me a day pass, but that was all I needed. I knew my golden tongue would make me a citizen by day's end. I realized this might be harder than I thought, as everyone treated me with maximum disdain just for daring to be born anywhere else. Citizenship would come later though. First thing was first. Spring Joshua by any means necessary. Lying, bribery, I wouldn't mind some light bloodshed from these bigots. I was able to convince the man in charge of Holden that Joshua was sick, and then made him really sweat by having him confront the idea that maybe, just maybe, these servants were, in fact, slaves. Then it's conditioned and kicked back in and he called me a moron. A lost cause. I walked Joshua back just in case anyone tried to stop us, and Amanda was so happy she tried to jump my bones. I quickly pushed Joshua in front of me and they decided to move out of the courtyard that very day. It was a shame that I didn't find Curtis's doll, because he offered to give me a cool wrench if I did. I did find Mr. Nixon later, and it told me to kill the Vault City Council. While that was pretty based, I lit it on fire and never told anyone about it until now. I looked around the courtyard satisfied. I helped most everyone except the people in the pen who weren't slaves for some reason. This somehow seemed even more dehumanizing. On my way to meeting the council to get my citizenship, I ran into what I thought was a religious zealot. I tried to walk past him, but we made eye contact, so politeness made me stop. I learned he was like the one woke guy in the city, preaching the sins. I was really liking what this guy was saying, so when he asked me to deliver a briefcase, I didn't hesitate to agree. He then handcuffed the briefcase to my wrist, and that's the origin of how I joined the Mafia. Apparently this guy had ties to the seedy city of Nerino. I was starting to think nobody in the city was actually worthwhile. Looking and failing to find the council some more, I stumbled into the Vault City Correction Center, also known as Slaves R Us. Here's where I met Sergeant Stark. I don't know why he screamed his rank at me, but it seemed very important to him. He's pulling double duty as a salesman and head of security. I guess nobody talks to him because it was only enough to immediately spill every problem with security. He needed somebody to do patrols. While I didn't like him, I needed to get him to go with the council if I was going to become a city member and change it. I figured if I'm already traveling the wasteland, maybe I can get some favors out of it. He wanted me to scout around Gecko, a ghoul encampment, because of racism. It's actually only partly racism. He thinks they're purposely poisoning their water supply. Now I'm kind of responsible for Gecko because I got killed at Vault 12, so I'm more than happy to do my part to inject myself into the situation to defuse it. He was also willing to let me go try to find the base of raiders who had been attacking the city. I'm not dumb enough to think I can take on a whole group of raiders. Suluk, my travel companion I freed from slavery in Klamath, is though, and volunteered us for the mission. I had to have a talk with him when we left. Stark seemed to think these guys were closer to mercenaries than raiders though, due to firepower and tactics, so I kept that in mind. The only direction he gave me was south, so I was confident I wouldn't accidentally stumble across them. I went through a bunch of other worthless buildings before finally finding the council building. It had a big sign that said Central Council, so you can see how I would be confused. This is where I met council member First Citizen Lynette. He liked to pretend to be busy, but was standing up and staring at a wall whenever I came in. I told her of my epic saga to find the Gek, so I might save a village from the ravages of the drought that befell its people. She told me to kick rocks. When I revealed my falsified heritage as a descendant myself, someone who LARPed a whole adventure as a vault dweller after accidentally murdering one, her attitude changed. She's willing to help me in my search, but only citizens are allowed to look through their files. On one hand, being a citizen in Vault City gave me so much access to information I could come and go as I pleased. On the other hand, taxes and slavery. I didn't have much choice if I wanted their information though, so I reluctantly filled out an application and went to take the test, meaning I agreed to help Stark for nothing. She stopped me and asked if I wanted to earn my citizenship another way. I heard the test was really hard, so I figured I would take one for the team and start to unzip my vault suit. When she started talking about sabotage, I zipped it back up before she noticed. She wanted me to travel to Gecko and disable their power plant. But I would call that Plan B. Power plants are pretty rare nowadays, and I would guess invaluable. Lynette seemed rather short-sighted for a woman with glasses. Proconsul Gregory told me about the test, and I rolled my eyes as he told me about the advanced mathematics, spatial relations, deductive reasoning, language comprehension, and the thorough physical examination that would take place. Bro, I fixed an elevator with some pliers. I think I got this. He left me and Suluk alone in the room, and we both got started with the test. I was stuck on question 1 for like 30 minutes as Suluk cranked through that thing. I psst to Suluk, and he let me copy all his answers once he was done. Gregory came back and praised my answers. Suluk and I just had to pass the physical examination, and we were golden. I'm an average male specimen, and Suluk is jacked, so I thought it would be fine. I passed, but see, Suluk had grown 2 extra toes, so we failed for that. He wasn't allowed to amputate them to pass, but he didn't really care. I later asked him how long he had them, and he said he grew them a month or so after we met. That was around the time I dragged him into a toxic cave looking to rescue a trapper named Smiley. I had kept my 1 pair of rubber boots to myself when we splashed through the toxic water. I felt a little bad, but he said more toes meant more muscle, so I guess he was cool with it. Maybe I'd take him back there for another dip on his birthday. After that exhausting test that Suluk suffered through and I copied, I got to meet Senior Counselor McClure. And I say got to meet because the pleasure was all mine. In a sea of racist, extremist slavers, he was the one good guy. He was complicit, but got to change the system from within, you know? He gave me a straight answer about the Gek. Vault 8 had used theirs and disassembled it for other applications as was instructed. And while they were supposed to have 2, there was a mix-up. Vault 13 received Vault 8's extra Gek, while Vault 8 received Vault 13's 100 surplus water chips. They never needed them though. Their purifier still runs on the same chip it started with. In a way, that chip mishap kind of saved the world. In the process of recording, this kind of struck me as weird. If Vault 8 has 100 surplus water chips, and their purifier still works, why are they concerned about Gecko poisoning their water supply? They've still got a purifier. Just purify your water. McClure told me about their woes, and even he didn't like Gecko. If Best Boy McClure didn't like Gecko, I had to check it out. While I was there, I also narked about Redding having a jet problem. He asked me to help them overcome their addiction so they could get more ore from their miners, and I decided to use what the DARE program taught me. 28 years sober thanks to them. Their program worked so well. Anyway, I immediately walked into a bar called the Parlor Room and drank 100 bottles of alcohol Z to help me forget everyone I met here. Instead of dying from alcohol poisoning, I felt stronger. Like if I had HP, it went up by 4 because if luck was a stat, mine was 10. With my new citizenship and 28 years sobership discarded, I smugly strutted past the guards and into Vault 8. Vault 8 was another vault that wasn't really hidden. They built it like a bunker with a cement wall and door guarding the actual door. Unsurprisingly, the vault was mostly empty. On the top floor, utilizing the clinic and I suppose sterile space, is the doctor, Troy. Standing outside was his assistant Phyllis, who was as interesting as wet cardboard. She was helpful though. She told me where the central computer is. I decided to thank her by raising her up and bringing her to dinner. It was the worst night of my life, and I once spent a night sleeping surrounded by frozen corpses. Something I always wondered about the vaults was if they planned children. Vault 8, or Vault City, actually does. Phyllis mentioned this to me as casual dinner conversation, because discussing children is always a good idea for the first date. While that might sound sarcastic, I genuinely believe that. Best to know if life goals are compatible early on so you don't waste each other's time. Anyway, it had me a bit confused. She explained Vault City has pregnancy cycles, so pregnancies only happen that year. Despite intercourse being allowed outside of these cycles, no one ever gets pregnant from them. Females are instead inseminated by the autodoc with chosen sperm. I asked what about accidental pregnancies, and she blinked at me. Those don't happen here. I thought about looking into it, and that made her think I wanted to donate sperm. I would later sneak in the dead of night and destroy my samples. I am not letting any child of mine grow up in this nice, clean city. They will be a mailman like their father. I decided to talk to the doctor to see if he was any better. At first, I thought he wasn't. He asked me for the highly addictive and illegal in the city jet for $1,000. I was hesitant, especially because he was being so sketchy about it. But the look on his face made me think it was nothing nefarious, so I agreed. I found tons of that stuff. Normally I just emptied it out into the desert soil, but I had a good feeling about Dr. Troy, so I gave him something that was slated for destruction. He said it would help his research, and I was relieved I didn't make Vault City's only doctor a junkie. After that, he was nice enough to give me a tour of his lab, heal my mild radiation, and vaccinate me from poison and radiation, so I was really liking him. I stopped fixing Sulik's extra toes, but since Sulik was not a citizen, that was not allowed. But he liked his toes anyway, so. I left the good doctor, the second person in the cesspool I liked, and made my way down. I noticed their elevator decal was wrong, and nobody ever bothered to fix it with a Sharpie. I made a pit stop on the second floor where they converted all these nice living quarters into storage. A lot of what was stored here was a laughable amount of water chips. I personally would have kept these rooms as living spaces. Like, sure, the city is nice, but Vault 8 is clean and has air conditioning. Would be a good place to quarantine people with diseases, or help anybody sick or injured be comfortable. Anyway, I didn't spend much time there, and made my way down to the third floor that was left largely intact. The only other person who hung out in the vault was Martin. Martin's job was to keep the storage room clean and locked. It made me feel kinda bad that I lose some lockers on my way over. He normally sings while doing his job, since he is usually the only one down here. It's really good despite his stutter, and I made a point to compliment him for it. He pointed me in the direction of the central computer, and I thanked him even though I already knew where it was. It looks just like Vault 12 without the radiation. This computer works way better than my old one, and I started searching the archives. I scrolled up to find something about Vault 13, but only had info about Vault 15. I remember that one. I briefly visited the remains of it many years ago before it was abandoned to colonize Shady Sands. I'd have to check it out again. I was about to look for something else when I noticed a hidden document. Thanks to how good I am with the computers thingies, I was able to gain access to a folder that was labeled as classified. I was hoping it would be an embarrassing snapshot of Lynette at the Christmas party, but instead it just showed me the true purpose of Vault 8. This document is what told me this was a control vault. They were supposed to open the vault after 10 years to settle the surface. I received conflicting information from Lynette and other sources about when the vault actually opened. Lynette said they opened the vault 2 years after it was sealed when the Great War began, while others say it was opened 14 years after the war started and 4 years after the Enclave gave them the all-clear signal to open. While I cannot determine which is true, it does not particularly matter. Either way, the Overseer deviated from the original mandate. I downloaded the data and started searching for the GEC on their systems. There was, of course, none here since they used it and the second was sent to Vault 13 by mistake. Nothing I didn't already know. I logged off when I noticed I could fit my Pip-Boy in a Pip-Boy shaped hole. Sticking something in holes has never gone poorly before, so I kept it up and put my Pip-Boy in. Lots of ominous things happened, but I stuck to my guns. Apparently my Pip-Boy missed maintenance by 15 years, and the computer wanted to reformat it. I might lose all my data, but maintenance is very important, so I did so. All it did was add new settlement locations to my map, give me a long travelogue that I uploaded to the net and will leave in the description, and give it a nice polish, which is why it looks so different now. I read the guide, and it was pompous as I assumed, but there were some interesting tidbits. Apparently the NCR has been founded since the last time I was here, and we're attempting to absorb Vault City as a territory. I like the NCR and hate Vault City, but I respect their choice to be their own territory, so I would be meddling in those affairs at some point. There was more mutant racism and more propaganda. I would hold on to this just for the data it held. My last stop before heading out of the city was the maintenance shed. I was actually looking for a store but made a mistake. Despite the attitude Valerie was giving me, I volunteered to find her some new tools, namely a wrench and a pair of pliers, hoping maybe she'd be nicer. She even offered to pay me, so mission accomplished already. I finally left the city and decided to go look at Gecko before doing anything else. I scouted around for Stark and found nothing weird, so I went into the settlement. As expected, it was all ghouls. I found a familiar face there, Harold. I met him briefly in 2161, but I doubt he recognized me, which was good. He told me they wanted to fix the reactor because it was close to blowing. They could fix it, but they needed a part from Vault City, and they probably wouldn't get it. That attracted me. And then a light bulb went off in my head. If they fixed the reactor, that would clean the water. If I brought a plan like that to McClure, it might get passed. I just needed a ghoul to write the plan for me so that it'd be an offering from Gecko. And I found it in Gordon. He gave me a data disk. He ran the numbers. With Vault City's expansion, they would run out of power in 15 years. The reactor in Gecko would blow in less than half of that. And even if it didn't, the ghouls here would die within 20 years without medical supplies. His plan was to have Vault 8 give Gecko their repair parts. Gecko would fix the reactor, then Gecko would sell the excess energy in exchange for medicine. Everyone wins. Even the water gets cleaned up. Gordon admitted he was motivated by greed, but his greed was going to fix everything if Vault City could just get past their blind hatred. I would definitely be giving this disc to McClure. I also met the ghoul Lenny. He remembered me. Or, at least he remembered me as being my grandpa from Vault 12, and he always wished he had asked to come along. I invited him along and ended up wishing I hadn't. I spent so much time saving his life that I brought him back and told him he'd be helping me here by sorting all my ammo. I dropped every excess bullet I had at him and left hoping he wouldn't be done by the time I got back. When I returned to Vault City after fooling around with other stuff, I had a trader named Vic with me. I had rescued him from some slavers a while back, and he decided to travel with me as a thank you. The overweight, middle-aged man who I'd have to protect constantly. I am so lucky. I sometimes called him Lenny by mistake. Thankfully, I found just a spot to dump him. I'd found Valerie some new tools and went to the maintenance building to deliver them, but I got to watch a reunion first. Vic is Valerie's father, and she berated him for leaving her. I was feeling very awkward, so I sat at the bookcase while I talked. They tried to rope me in, so I mumbled a little bit while feigning interest in a copy of Dean's Electronics. They had a lot of issues to work out, so I decided to leave Vic here, so go back to being just me and my best buddy Suluk. Oh, and my wife Miria. I accidentally got married. Her father walked in on us while we were discussing philosophy, and apparently that's an engagement where he's from. We were wedded the next day for her dad's shotgun in attendance. We decided we were better off as friends though, so no actual romance, but we do get tax benefits. When they stopped arguing for a minute to catch their breath, I gave Valerie her new tools, which I think she referred to her dad. She gave me a super tool in exchange, which confused me. I gave her pliers and a wrench, and there was one of each of those in here. I guess she got her brains from Vic. I left the unhappy family because I had jobs to finish. Stark gave me $300 for scouting around Gecko, and then decided he wanted to send me to the NCR to check out their military and report back. That was quite a journey, which is why he was sending me to plot a course. I think he was hoping I would die, since caravans make that journey all the time. I left him go find that silver fox McClure to see if he had any interest in Gecko/Gordon's plan. He was so eager to stop the radiation the plant was doing that he was more than happy to secure me a hydroelectric magnetosphere regulator. What is that? Vault City was better at stocking parts than Home Depot. I also showed him Gordon's disc, and he got angry for a moment, thinking I was suggesting they seize Gecko. I love this man! I quickly interrupted to let him know that Gecko was willing to trade excess power for medical assistance. We decided he would try to sway the council while I worked on the plant. I got the part and headed back to Gecko. Back in the power plant, I met a ghoul named Festus who offered to install the part for me, but I kinda wanted to see this through to the end. I fixed a food processor once. A power plant should be easy street. I learned the core was full of radiation and decided I wasn't ready to lose all my hair just yet. Maybe when I'm 30. Oh, it's just now realizing it's scarily close. Instead, I had to fix the remote control operator robot to do it. Hacking into the system was the hard part. After that, it was easy to get the robot to fix the plant, as long as you know the order of the planets in the solar system. Suluk had to remind me that Jupiter was for Saturn. With that, I successfully repaired the Gecko power plant, which would make a lot of people happy and less radioactive. With that pressing issue done, I decided to travel to the NCR for Stark. Maybe someone there would know how to optimize the power plant. I decided to stop in Nerino to get this freaking briefcase uncut from my wrist. It kept slamming into my side and now I was very bruised. I found Bishop's Casino, which I would have thought was the most obvious mafia front ever, but they were pretty open about it being the mob. I walked upstairs and found Mrs. Bishop before the Mr. Mrs. Bishop knew a lot about Vault City, which was helpful, but she seemed to know more about me. She invited me to her room for a drink, and while I thought about declining, I was interested to see if she had any Nuka-Cola. She had other ideas, though. Doing starfish positions on her bed! It struck me as weird, but it didn't violate any of the vows of my sham marriage, so I was fine. I decided to ask her if she was from Vault City, and she seemed shocked I put it together. She missed it terribly, but was kicked out after John Bishop visited, charmed her, and got her to try drugs which were illegal in Vault City. She had to go with Bishop, which is what he had planned. She explained she was educated because she took one of the lingual enhancers for a Pip-Boy when she left. It works by flashing an entire dictionary into one's brain. Truly astounding technology that we shouldn't think too hard about. She let me have it since there wasn't any use to her anymore. I looked back to thank her. She just seemed so miserable. I made a promise to myself to get her out of this life. Maybe I couldn't get her back to Vault City, but I could at least get her out of New Reno. Just to really stick it to her husband, I stole from his safe too. Everyone should learn how to pick locks. I then got to meet Mr. Bishop, the husband of the woman I just pretended to be a starfish with. Based on what she told me, and what I had already deduced, he was a mafia man. I was not pleased to be meeting with him, but I need to be rid of this briefcase. For whatever reason, he decided to tell me it had some Vault City tech in it. I was just relieved there was just tech and not something more sinister, like drugs or thumbs or Vault City propaganda. He immediately gave me another job, but that's a story for another time. I accepted it just to get out of there alive even if I had no intention of fulfilling it. I did eventually make it to the NCR and got an appointment with the leader, Tandy. Somehow. Security was so lax. I was glad to see she was alive. I had saved her from raiders a long time ago. She didn't age well, but she survived. When I was in Bishop's, let's call it a casino, I'd heard some troubling rumors about an alliance with the NCR. I was curious about this and I appreciated her candor. The NCR was working with them to try and get more pull with Vault City. I had hoped there was an elaborate plot to backstab the Mafia and drive crime out of New Reno too, but no, they have too much of their own agenda to fulfill. The NCR was working with them to try and get more pull of Vault City. To think I trusted the NCR, but here they were allying with common criminals. With my route to the NCR plotted, I made my way back to Vault City to rub in Stark's stupid face. But first, I had an appointment with Thomas More, if that's even his real name. I accused him of deception, and he came clean, but he said he had good intentions. I called him hypocrite for lying, and he was so upset he talked to me just like any old man does when you deviate even slightly from what they deem as acceptable. I decided to turn him into Lynette to get exiled. I don't like her, but she gets results. First though, I had to visit Stark again. He didn't even flinch when I said I had the route. I don't think he remembered me. There's maybe 17 brain cells in that head, and they're focused on convincing himself they don't do slavery. Maybe the NCR should take this place over. Stark gave me some money and some motion sensor they had sitting around in a drawer. He said it was useless to them since it was too old, but it worked fine for my older model. They were all made at the same time. How dumb is he? I bet he just couldn't figure out how to plug it in correctly. It'd be very useful for combat though. I stopped on by to see the doctor who, in his spare time, discovered a cure for jet addiction. I'm so glad I trusted him. He asked me to take it to writing for a patient there, and that became my priority for a little bit. I asked if he could treat me, the missus, and Sulik while we were here. Unfortunately, he could only treat citizens, but he whispered where I could find some stim packs that might just go missing. I love this guy. He let me play around on the computers and remove a lollipop for being a good patient, and I discovered schematics for some real nerd stuff. However, it would make me harder to kill, which is always a plus in my line of work. So I downloaded them and brought them to a different doctor. Sure, I had his hands full sleeping standing straight up. Dr. Answers owed me one, so I brought him the blueprints. He'd be happy to do it as long as I brought him combat armor and a hefty fee. So he would still owe me one. The crook. It took me a very long time, but I eventually found 4 extra sets of combat armor and over $200,000 to pay for the surgery. Only then did Answers inform me these combat implants would give me the ugly. Somehow I figured I would be okay. I just hope these didn't interfere with the implants I got in New Vegas. Though I think they showed it out when I first moved through time. I stopped at the bar in the courtyard to show that I'm still one of them, even if I'm a citizen now. I endured the jeers asking if I was slumming it while I talked to the bartender. John Cassidy. I focused on his face and he looked real familiar, but I didn't know where I had seen him. That was in my head, so I made small talk before leaving. Trying to place his face would be an activity for the next few days. I had been holding this information close to my chest. But it was time the truth was revealed. When I stole from Bishop's safe back in New Reno, I learned some startling things. Bishop was hiring mercenaries to attack Vault City in hopes they would turn to the NCR for military aid. Now, I'm unsure if the NCR knows that, but they are allied with him, so they must approve of his tactics in some way. The safe also included a map, so I knew just where those marks were hiding. I don't like Vault City, I really don't. But these are trained mercenaries. I don't think Vault City guards could handle it. To be honest, with guns like what they had, I didn't even think Sulu could handle it. So I went in alone. With Miria. She didn't like being alone with Sulik because he kept talking about Ghost, so the bloodbath was preferable. I told her to hide while I took care of things. It took a long time and a lot of stim packs, but eventually I killed all of them. Thank goodness my pistol was long range and this cave naturally formed long hallways. I found a logbook that I thought Lynette would be very interested in detailing Bishop's plan. I was worried that this would make her declare war on the NCR, but she had other ideas. She asked me to deliver a holodisk to Roger Weston in the NCR, citing him as the only honest man there. I would do that, but I had more pressing matters. Earlier, when I went to rub it in Stark's face that I found and killed the Raiders, he couldn't. He seemed to connect two thoughts together long enough to thank me for my help and tell me about another problem he can't solve. In a nearby village, there was a bunch of mole rats he wanted wiped out. I asked him why, and he said it was his job to give orders. And apparently this was a cheap wedding, because he also had a thinly veiled threat about harming the villagers if he had to send his own troops. He said I had a month before he sent his troops, which was weird. Usually people don't care if I took years to fix their problems, but since I had a time limit, I got started immediately. After giving Lynette the logbook. After having a really rough time mapping out a way to the village, I finally got there. I told someone I was there to kill the mole rats, and there was no need to thank me. This man who identified himself as Connor immediately stopped me. Apparently these mole rats were the only thing protecting this village from becoming slaves of Vault City. I saw red. Stark sent me to wipe out the mole rats so he could save his troops from getting injured, and then use them to round up the villagers, and wanted to make me complicit by killing the rats and maybe even die in the process. He would pay for this. I changed teams and asked how I could help them. Connor suggested that if they put up any kind of fight, the Vault City guys would immediately give up. Which tracks. They just needed me to secure weaponry. I suggested that I talk to the council, but he wasn't convinced. I would try things peacefully and get the weapons if talks broke down. Before I left, I was curious about the mole rats' appearance and asked about them. Connor said some ghouls brought them, gave them some amulets, and told them the rats would protect them from now on. He gave me an amulet and I scattled to tattle to McClure about Stark. I went to Stark first just to see if he would deny it. He was too dumb to and immediately admitted that enslavement was his plan. The savages would be safe under Vault City law, and they'd be much happier serving their new masters. I talked to McClure, who was a victim of his own good nature. He blindly believed Stark that the mole rats were a danger to the patrols and they needed to be put down. I promised to take care of the issue if he promised Vault Village, as I've taken to calling it, would be free. He agreed and even postponed the raid another month. Every government needs a McClure. I had to hold up my end of the deal though, and plan a backup just in case I failed. So I went to secure guns for Vault Village. I went to meet the contact and I couldn't believe my eyes. Ian. 80-something years later, my best friend from before was still alive, even if he changed his name to Joe. I'm so glad I saved him from death in Necropolis. He recognized me and I was so stunned I didn't even think to hide my identity from him. I did have to play dumb after I regained my faculties though. I hated lying to Ian, but I told him I was a descendant of his friends who would at least think I died happy. Speaking of, I asked him how he was still alive. He was well over 100 at this point. He joked that it was probably all the radiation that I should have given him some Rad-X, but it looks like it turned out for the best. He looks great. We talked a little bit about Vault Village, and I told him that I didn't think guns would be necessary, but if I didn't come back in a month, he should bring the guns to the village. I would try to solve things diplomatically, but we had to be ready for anything. To help me out, he said the mole rats and ghouls came from Gecko, so I should look around there. He handed me a pistol to help me take care of myself, and I took it even though I had a much better gun. One last gift from him. This man, 80 years later, and he's still helping me out. I would sell this gun soon. I did have to get going, so I bid him goodbye. I stopped to talk to the bartender to see if I could figure out where I knew him from. I asked him if anything interesting was going on, so I didn't get weirded out while I stared at him. He told me about Joshua being hauled away, which is very old news. Then, oh boy, he told me about how Stark raided him for selling whiskey, despite the permit Stark sold him 3 months back, putting him in debt. Like I needed another reason to fantasize about having Stark join Rotface. He hates the city but only stays for the good medical care since he has a bad heart. I liked the cut of his jib, and Miri was looking at him all moony-eyed, so I invited him to come with me. He said, "What the hey?" And when I tried to call him John, he said to call him Cassidy. That was when it hit me. That was why he looked so familiar. The face, the attitude, the inexplicable attraction I had as a straight male. I knew his face because I had seen it countless times in New Vegas. It's the reason I ended up in the past in the first place. I was looking into the eyes of Cass's dad before he was a dad. I cared greatly about Miri and Stulik, but preserving the timeline by making sure Cass was born was my new priority, which meant Cassidy had to be protected at all costs. With my new party, I headed to Gecko to figure out what was up with the mole rats. I talked to a guy who told me he heard people coming and going from the reactor late at night. That struck me as suspicious, so I poked around and found an entrance leading underground. Part of the plant was built underground, and I guess inaccessible from the above section after the bombs fell, but this emergency tunnel was left operational. These ghouls were religious zealots and talked about renewal, but they were also really welcoming, so that was nice. Colds do catch more fools with honey than vinegar. I made my way through the tunnel and found a talking mole rat. This would have really surprised me if it wasn't the second one I met. This one was actually related to the other one I met, and since he was dead, I decided not to tell them that I was the reason why. He sensed my talisman and asked if I was joining them in their plan to take over the world. Man, this is why people kill mole rats on sight. I told them I just wanted the mole rats to stop attacking Vault City patrols. They offered a trade. I optimized the power plant and they'll stop attacking the patrols. I always planned to do it, but I didn't know if I could do it in 2 months' time. I appealed to them that the villagers would be enslaved if they didn't stop, so they acquiesced. Now that that business was squared away, I could work on the reactor knowing the village was safe. The mole rat wanted both Gecko and Vault City to be strong so that they were something worth taking over, which makes them way better than most supervillains who plan to destroy the world and then take it over. They told me to take the economic discord and gave me to McClure, something I did long ago, so I don't think they're as smart as they think they are. They also told me to talk to Festus. Vault City apparently had data to optimize the plant, and Festus wanted me to steal it from Vault City's computer, but I said I'd talk to McClure. He had earned the right for me to be transparent with him. First, he upheld his end of the deal and canceled the raid on Vault Village since the mole rat attack stopped, which probably made Stark sulk. And then when I told him that I could optimize the plant if I copied the data, he granted me permission. I got the data, brought the disk back to the plant, plugged it in to optimize it, and was underwhelmed. Nothing seemed to change, but I felt like I just sealed Gecko's doom if I hadn't flipped that restoration switch. At least Gordon was psyched. With the power plant taken care of, and Gecko, Vault Village, and Vault City forming an uneasy truce, I felt like I could go back to the NCR to fix one of the last 2 threats to Vault City, even if they don't deserve it. Back in the NCR, I learned Weston had a ranch. Dude did very well for himself. He had walls, a stable, his own generator, and multiple guards and workers. All very loyal. I think Lynette was right. This was a good guy. I guess that's why the bishops want him dead. Yeah, the job the bishop gave me was to kill Weston. Warning him was always on my to-do list, but I got kind of swept up in other things. It all worked out. He was still alive, and I could save 2 birds with 1 stone. I guess Weston is a traitor because he gave me a holodisk detail on NCR and New Reno's plan for Lynette, which is fine. I can't really look at NCR the same way anymore. I also warned him the bishops wanted him dead and did some other stuff for him, which isn't important right now. I booked it back to Vault City with Weston's disc. It would feel tedious, but this was my job before I started getting wrapped up in Vault exploration. It felt like a vacation. She scanned the disc and simply said they would have no more problems with the NCR, which felt ominous and told me I could pick up my reward at the amenities office. An K-11 and 2 grenades the guy threw in as thanks for killing the raiders. These people really think of me as very one-dimensional. But Lynette did respect me enough to make me captain of the guard. Finally, a bit of respect from these citizens. My first law was to allow ghouls and mutants into the city. And they said I could bring one of each in. I guess I could bring in Lenny. And my friend Marcus from Broken Hills. Encountering him here was spooky because I met him in New Vegas. But he didn't seem to remember me when I met him then. Or maybe he did and realized he shouldn't talk about it. Marcus always was a lot smarter than I gave him credit for. With this new power, all my friends were allowed free healthcare as well. This was a relief because I had not helped Cassidy find any heart medicine while we explored. But the big winner here is Marcus. While Dr. Troy was examining him, he pulled out all sorts of ammo from his body. So many bullets and somehow all usable. Marcus let me keep them, but they didn't work with my gun, so I accidentally dropped them all in front of Lenny to keep him busy. The last thing I did with my new position was something I had wanted to do since I stepped foot in the correction center. Tell Stark off. Now I couldn't just completely tear him down, but when I sensed that he resented that I claimed the job he had been chasing, boy did I destroy him in the most professional way possible. Maybe he would have actually gotten results if he did more than stand there all day and contract out his work. But I wasn't satisfied quite yet. Stealing his dream job and telling him off for good, but I remember what Cassidy told me about the raid. Stark tried to tell me it was completely legit, and I feigned that I believed him. We were still going to have him pay back Cassidy for every cent it cost him and clean his record. I didn't know what Cassidy was going to do after we parted ways, but I wanted him to be able to come back to his bar if he wanted to. After all the craziness ended, I was thinking of settling down in Vault City since I had been here a while now. Maybe become McClure's assistant and change things from the inside. Give up this adventure in life since it seemed this time the time machine wasn't coming back. Maybe Miri and I could make a real go of this marriage. There was one thing I had to do first, though. Keep a promise. I returned to New Reno, and since I slaughtered the bishops many months ago, I found Mrs. Bishop picking up the pieces of the family. She held no animosity towards me for killing the Mafia. I invited her to lay like a starfish with me again, and we talked some more. I tried to convince her with Mr. Bishop gone that she could leave New Reno now. She scoffed, but eventually I got her to come around to the idea. I thought maybe I could even get her back into Vault City, but I didn't want to promise her that until I had it in writing. I bid her goodbye. I'd find her again when I got her citizenship reinstated. Or so I thought. One night, as we were traveling through the wasteland on the way back to Vault City, I was keeping watch with Siluk, telling him about my plan for Mrs. Bishop. And there it suddenly was. The time machine appeared again. I had told Siluk about it a long time ago when I was desperate to fill his silence when we just met. I never thought he believed me. But as I turned to him to gloat, I saw he was crying. It wasn't that he didn't believe me. It was that he didn't want to believe I would someday have to leave him. I wanted to wake Cassidy and Miria, to tell them I had to go. But I had a feeling the time machine wouldn't wait for that. It was a hard decision. I was somewhat happy here. I could make a real difference. But back in my time, somebody waited for me. And I wanted to see them again. I slipped off my wedding ring and handed it to Siluk. Asked them to take care of them for me. I turned back and caught sight of Miri and Cassidy staggering to their feet as I stepped in. I gave him a small smile and stepped through. Miria blew me a kiss. Cassidy saluted, and Suluk bowed. The one thing they all had in common was tears. Although Cassidy probably just had something in his eyes. A flash of light and I was gone. I didn't know where I'd be going this time, but I had a feeling I wasn't going to be allowed to go home just yet. The computer on board was nice enough to summarize what happened to Vault City and Gecko after I departed. Apparently, correspondence continued between the NCR and Vault City despite their #1 courier being absent. Weston became head of the council, declared Vault City independent, faked a heart attack, and retired to Vault City for medical treatment, and happened to marry Lynette while there. As for Gecko, with them trading electricity to Vault City in exchange for medical equipment, the members of Vault City learned they weren't so different. Eventually, as it should be with all governments, the old thoughts of xenophobia died with the older council. Except McClure, who was always good. And human and ghouls labored side by side for a better tomorrow. The computer also told me this didn't happen in most timelines where the power plant was optimized, only the ones where the nerdy angels swooped in to help. Otherwise, Gecko is normally enslaved. The computer called it a bug, whatever that means. There was one community I didn't expect to have ties to Vault City after I left. Due to him helping the miners become clean of jet, Doc Johnson was elected to the mayor's seat. He eventually helped Vault City annex them, which was a bad move as only 10% of them got citizenship. I felt bad about that one, but glad they were clean of jet at least. 2241 wasn't bad. A lot of it was full of love, laughter, and dead aliens. It's just a shame that so much of it was not canon to life. God went a little crazy for the scissors there. However, Vault 8 opening and founding Vault City was canon. Despite not waiting exactly 10 years to open, they thrived on the surface with the Gek and became a major powerhouse in California post-bombs. Vault-Tec didn't make this vault good because there was a shred of human decency in them. They only made this one viable because experiments need control groups. So thankfully they were good scientists and sprinkled a few of them in. Otherwise, only the tame experiments would have survived, because the vaults were never meant to save anyone.